Hello, friends. It's Holly Wainwright jumping into your ears, not literally, that would be weird, to tell you about the next season of Mid and how it's all about you. You see, over the last 5 seasons, we've talked about everything on Mid, from marriage and divorce to hormones and fashion and sex and grief, life, right? And we've had so much feedback from you about your own messy middles that we have decided to make a season all about that, about you and the challenges that you're facing. The next season of Mid is all about dilemmas and wisdom and sharing both those things. And I am phoning in my friends to help. Hopefully, we're going to sort it out. And me and my more qualified mates, we are really going there. Mid, Conversations for Gen X Women Who Are Anything But, is back in your ears with your questions on Tuesday, July 15th.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Oh, hi there. It's Claire Murphy here. We hope you've enjoyed the last few weeks on our perimenopausal journey. And if you haven't already, definitely tune into our peri specialette with Shelley Horton. Today, we're bringing you another health conversation from Mamamia's daily news podcast, The Quicky. They're speaking to Jess Westcott, who went through a medically induced menopause at just 27 years of age, and also talking to Dr. Kelly Teagle, the founder and principal clinician of WellFemme, a telehealth-only menopause clinic, about what early menopause actually means. Enjoy.
Your 20s and 30s. It's a time when many women are thinking about careers, relationships, maybe even starting a family. But for some, that choice is taken away before they even get the chance to decide, trading nights out for egg freezing and carefree plans for clinic appointments. Early menopause is seeing women like Jess Westcott experience the change well before expected.
I think before I had gone through it personally, I probably just would have said, menopause is crap. And it's a dry vagina and hot flushes. That's probably all I knew. I had no appreciation for how much of a role estrogen plays in your body and how protective it is for your body.
Jess was placed into a medically induced menopause at 27 years old after being diagnosed with breast cancer.
I was freshly 27. I was diagnosed with a hormone-positive breast cancer. One of the longer-term treatment options is something called hormone therapy or endocrine therapy. And essentially the goal of that treatment is to suppress or reduce the hormone production in your body, because the hormones are what my particular breast cancer fed off, and that's what helped it to grow. So by suppressing hormones and I guess essentially putting the body into a menopause, it's reducing their chance of recurrence. So for me, what that meant was going on some daily oral tablets and some monthly injections, and essentially both of those 2 different medications. One switches off my ovaries, which is where most estrogen is produced, and the tablets do something very similar. I'm now 29, and I guess 2 and a bit years in, I am in a temporary medically induced menopause, and at the moment that will sort of be for about 7 to 10 years or so.
She says the menopausal symptoms came on thick and fast, and while yes, she experiences the usual hot sweats and insomnia, the side effects were more than just that.
The hot flushes and the night sweats, it's waking up with your clothing absolutely drenched. Instant, insane need to just strip every layer of clothing off you when you're in a meeting at work, and that just being the only thing that you can focus on. But it's other things. It's brain fog and a bit of memory loss at times. It impacts your mood, I think, definitely, and sometimes can affect sleep. That's a big thing for me, insomnia. Joint and bone stiffness and muscular sort of pain, that's a big thing as well. Fairly broad reaching. There's other things around monitoring your bone health as well. There's heart health to be thinking of too. Libido and dryness across the body as well. That's a huge thing too, and that's something I think has had a big impact for me as someone that's in their late 20s now, but that's a pretty isolating thing, I think, to navigate that side of it.
And then there's the mental impact of cancer, of menopause in your 20s, of coming to terms with what a future family may or may not look like.
I don't really know if I've got the words to really describe it, but I think, in talking to peers that I've met that are on the same treatment or, also in their 20s and navigating a medically induced menopause, it's just something that you can almost physically feel that you just don't, your mood is just not quite the way it could be. And it's sort of hard to know, is that kind of a response to the situation and what you've been through and that sort of thing. But I certainly think that generally my mood is a bit lower than I used to be, and maybe feelings of anxiety are a little bit more prominent. So I did fertility preservation. I did a quick egg retrieval cycle. But I guess in terms of this hormone therapy, it's that sort of 7 to 10 years. By that time, I will be in my late 30s. And, if you're to go off the treatment to try and conceive for a little bit, I think it's very, very much timed down to the minute. And for me, in that sense, it's accepting the risk that if I'm off that treatment and going through something like pregnancy with hormones flowing through my body, what is at risk there and what am I comfortable with? But certainly it's a weird thing to navigate, kind of not being this fertile woman with hormones flushing through her body. And, I will probably have friends, and I have had friends that are starting to have families and all those sorts of things. And that's not quite the reality for me at the moment. So it's a bit jarring. And I actually don't think I realised how much I wanted to have a family of my own until I kind of was in a situation where it wasn't necessarily an immediate option right now.
Despite everything, Jess has come to terms with her current situation.
I think in the moment it was probably more sadness and a bit of grief. I think I could sort of reconcile that, chemo, surgery, mastectomy, that was kind of all needed. But this thing was like, oh, okay, so once I've got through all of that, it's likely a decade of being menopausal in, what's meant to be your 30s, the fun years of your life, and, the late 20s and stuff. And I just got out of COVID and all of those things. So it was grief and it was shock. Nowadays, I can look at it and think I am lucky that I've had a particular kind of cancer where I can take an oral therapy and have an injection once a month that can help prevent. I can very much see it as I get to do this, which is really helpful to be able to reframe it. But definitely at the start, it was a grieving process.
While the group of women who experience premature menopause is small, information about this medical anomaly is still slim. Dr. Kelly Teagle is the founder and director of the WellFemme Menopausal Telehealth Clinic. She also recently delivered a webinar of women with lived experience of premature menopause. Kelly, when we say early menopause, what does that actually mean?
Menopause is actually an event. It's like the time that you pop out your final egg, your final ovulation. So we don't know that that's happened until we kind of look back after 12 months and go, no periods for 12 months. Oh, I guess we're in menopause. Although there are a lot of other reasons why you might not have periods for 12 months. Early menopause would be if the process is hastened in some way. The average age of menopause is around 51 years in Australia. Early menopause, we generally talk about anyone who's gone through a menopause under the age of 45. And about 1% of women will actually go through menopause even under the age of 40.
Now, quick question. How many half-used beauty products are currently living in your bathroom drawer? Too many, right? That's where U Beauty comes in. We test everything from supermarket finds to luxury splurges and tell you what's worth it. U Beauty, saving your skin and your wallet. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
So I've been doing a little bit of reading up on women who've shared their experience of early menopause. Something that a lot of them have spoken about is something else in their health as a trigger for early menopause or medically induced menopause, like premature ovarian failure or even breast cancer, a few cases have highlighted. Is that always the case when we talk about early menopause? Is it because of something else going on?
No, this is the interesting thing. So even premature ovarian failure itself, which I'll tell you the definition of that is actually if you've gone through menopause before the age of 40. So those are the 1% that I was talking about. Premature ovarian failure can happen in itself for a lot of different reasons, which could be just unknown reasons. It could be just naturally you've run out of eggs for whatever reason, genetic, environmental, various different things have caused you to run out of eggs or stop ovulating before the age of 40. But there are, in some people's cases, a medical trigger for that. So in the case of breast cancer, it might be that you had to undergo treatment like chemotherapy, which impacted on the functioning of the ovaries and stopped them from functioning. And for this reason, a lot of people who are going through cancer treatment might actually freeze some eggs prior to starting their chemotherapy to preserve their fertility and give them options later. So a lot of cases might have a medical trigger such as that. And a lot of women actually who have a high genetic risk. So there's a lot of people who have certain gene mutations, for example, or a high risk of inherited cancers, they might undertake surgeries preemptively to make sure that they don't develop ovarian cancer by having their ovaries removed at a really young age. It's a really important medical issue that those women understand the longer term consequences of going through menopause at such an early age.
How does this differ from traditional menopause? I mean, the age is obviously one of the big standouts here. There are other reasons like those triggers we've just talked about. Are all the signs and the symptoms the same though? They're just brought on earlier, or is it different?
Certainly in the case of people who've undergone medical treatment that very suddenly threw them into menopause, they don't get this normal physiological adaptation time called perimenopause that usually gears us up and prepares us for that process. So they have gone from having fairly normal reproductive cycles to, whoops, no ovaries anymore. Really, their levels of estrogen production have absolutely crashed because they don't have ovaries anymore. And that throws them into very sudden, severe withdrawal. When you think about any kind of hormone or drug that your body's been adapted to over a long period of time and you suddenly withdraw it, you get withdrawal symptoms. And it's just exactly like the sort of symptoms that you would expect from a menopausal woman who's gone through at regular age, except that it's all happened really suddenly in a system that hasn't had any time to adapt. So the symptoms can be much more severe and can be longer lasting and more difficult to treat as well. So it is actually quite a different beast. The important thing to remember if you're going through menopause at a much younger age than normal is that having low estrogen for a prolonged period of time, much, much younger than the average of 51 years, is going to have a big impact on your bone density, your likelihood of developing cardiovascular disease or dementia at a younger age. So your risk of chronic disease is really, really inflated if you've gone through an early menopause.
Kelly, this is going to sound like a really silly question, but for people who go through early menopause, medically induced menopause, is there any chance their periods will return, or is that the end of the line in that regard for them?
No, not a silly question at all, because a lot of women who go through an early or premature menopause, it's counted as being spontaneous or idiopathic. We don't actually know the reason why. And as you can imagine, there's quite a high number of those cases that actually might spontaneously restart ovulating again as well. So that's the sort of situation. A lot of women will go, oh, okay, I've been diagnosed with premature menopause, and think that they don't need to have contraception. But that's not necessarily the case. Just like somebody who's been breastfeeding after delivering a baby, it's not until after you've had your first ovulation that you'll notice your periods returning. And so that does mean that there's a potential there for pregnancy if you start to spontaneously ovulate again, which obviously won't be the case if you've had your ovaries removed. So that's a bit of a different situation. Or if you've had a hysterectomy, you won't get any periods. Yeah, it's very important to remember that if you've spontaneously gone into early menopause, it doesn't necessarily mean it's all over Red Rover. It actually might spontaneously restart as well.
You've mentioned that there's the potential of spontaneous pregnancy. You've also mentioned that some women choose to freeze their eggs for IVF down the road if that's the path that they're choosing to take. So regardless of whichever way you're coming about this, it does have some sort of impact on pregnancy and fertility.
Absolutely. So if you're somebody who's very motivated to have children and you have a strong family history of, say, early menopause, premature menopause, or if you're undergoing any kind of medical treatments that you know are going to affect your ovaries, remove your ovaries, those are going to be front of mind. You know, how do we then actually take action to make sure that you still have this ability to have children later? But obviously the case of the premature ovarian failure, or premature ovarian insufficiency is really tragic, and heartbreaking, because women can be very, very young and not even had time to even consider whether or not they want to have children, and then find out that that choice has been taken away from them. So you can imagine how devastating that is when you actually don't even have any warning or any avenues for taking steps to prevent it. It's really heartbreaking.
Thanks for checking this out with us today. Remember, if you have any worries that we haven't addressed here, or even if we have, check in with your own doctor to make sure you're getting the right advice for you. You can find a link to get your daily news update from the Quicky in our show notes. And make sure you check out our next episode of Well. We're moving on to a health check deep dive. Find Well wherever you get your podcasts.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Parenting podcasts can be a bit earnest. Parenting Out Loud is not that podcast.
This person who I may not agree with politically is trying to talk about integrating children, not just into his professional life, but into public life.
I have referred to myself as one and done. That article did make me rethink the term.
It took about 11 seconds for this to go viral.
Oh God, is this the ejaculate one? That is deranged and I love it.
Parenting changes the way you see everything. Parenting Out Loud takes the big conversations of the moment and puts them through that filter.
Because if parents are thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Parenting Out Loud. Listen weekly wherever you get your podcasts.